The grave was real. The body inside it was not. And the man kneeling in front of that headstone, 6 feet 4 inches, 260 pounds, iron wolves MC patches on his back, tattoos crawling up his neck like battle scars, was sobbing so hard his whole body shook. His fists could break bones. His tears said something had already broken him. Riverside Memorial Cemetery, Cleveland, Ohio. February. 14 degrees. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it punishes you. The headstone read, Dominic James Mercer. October 3, 2016 to March 15, 2024. Forever our little wolf. 7 years old. Dead in a school bus crash 11 months ago. Burned beyond recognition. Buried in a closed casket because there wasn't enough left to look at. That's what everyone believed. That's what his father believed. But 40 feet away, hiding behind a cemetery maintenance shed, a 17-year-old homeless girl was watching. Shaking. And not from the cold. Her name was Juniper Holloway. Her coat was 3 sizes too big. Duct tape held the zipper together. Her gloves had no fingers. Her shoes let in more snow than they kept out. She'd walked 3 miles in weather that would kill most people just to stand here. Because she knew something. Something that would either save this man's life or end hers. For the past 11 days, Juniper had been sharing her food with a 7-year-old boy hiding in the basement of an abandoned brewery on Cleveland's west side. A boy with green eyes. A gap-toothed smile. A small wooden wolf pendant hanging around his neck. A boy with cigarette burns on his forearms. Fingers that had been broken and healed crooked. And the kind of fear in his eyes that only comes from being hurt by people who were supposed to protect you. That boy's name was Dominic Mercer. The same name carved into the headstone 20 feet away. The same boy everyone thought was dead. He wasn't. He'd been taken. Held for 11 months. Tortured. Told his father didn't want him anymore. Shown a newspaper clipping that said he'd died in that bus crash. And he'd escaped. On New Year's Day, wearing nothing but thin wolf print pajamas, he'd run through the snow until his feet went numb. He'd hidden in that freezing basement, surviving on scraps, waiting for someone, anyone, to find him. Juniper found him. And now she was about to walk up to the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever seen and say 6 words that would change everything. But her feet wouldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This man could crush her skull with one hand. He was grieving. Unpredictable. A biker with patches that meant he'd seen things, done things, survived things she couldn't comprehend. Then she thought about Dominic. The way he'd grabbed her sleeve 2 days ago when she tried to leave. The way he'd whispered, "Will you come back? Everyone always leaves." The way he'd cried without making any sound, because somewhere along the way he'd learned that noise meant pain. She'd promised him she'd come back. She hadn't promised she'd bring his father. That seemed too impossible to promise. Until now. Juniper took a breath. Counted to 3 the way her grandmother had taught her before she died. Then she stepped forward. And in the next 60 seconds, one homeless girl would expose a child trafficking network that had been operating inside Cleveland's emergency services for over a decade. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The crunch of frozen grass under Juniper's boots sounded like gunshots in the cemetery silence. The biker's head snapped up. Red-rimmed eyes. Swollen from crying. But hard. Calculating. The eyes of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading threats before they arrived. "Get lost, kid." His voice was gravel-dragged across concrete. Dismissive. Final. He turned back to the grave. Juniper's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her fingers were numb inside her useless gloves. Everything in her body screamed to walk away. But she saw Dominic's face in her mind. Blue lips. Shaking hands. The silent tears of a child who'd forgotten how to hope. "Sir." Her voice cracked. She swallowed. Tried again. "Sir, I need to tell you something about your son." The man went still. Not calm still. Predator still. The kind of motionless that comes right before violence. Slowly, so slowly it made Juniper's skin crawl, he rose to his full height. And kept rising. He blocked out the gray winter sky like a living eclipse. What did you just say? Juniper's hands trembled as she reached into her coat pocket. She almost couldn't grip what was inside. But she pulled it out and held it toward him with shaking fingers. A wooden pendant. Hand-carved. About 2 inches long. Shaped like a wolf with its head raised in a howl. The cord was frayed. The wood was dark, worn smooth by years of small hands holding it tight. The biker's face drained of color. Not pale, but like someone had opened a valve and let every drop of blood fall right out of him. His hand reached out. Stopped halfway. Trembled in the frozen air between them. Where did you get that? A little boy gave it to me. Juniper's words came faster now, tumbling over each other. He's 7 years old. Green eyes. Gap in his front teeth. He told me his daddy carved this when he was born. He said his daddy called him Little Wolf. He said his daddy has a wolf on his back just like this one. The biker wasn't breathing. He's hiding in the old Brennan Brewery on West 73rd. He's been there almost 2 weeks. He escaped from somewhere on New Year's Day. He said bad people took him after the bus crash. They told him you didn't want him anymore. They showed him a newspaper that said he died. They told him if he tried to find you, they'd hurt you. Stop. The word came out strangled. Broken. Declan Mercer, because that was his name, though Juniper wouldn't learn it until later, collapsed onto the stone bench beside the grave. Like his legs had just quit working. He stared at the wooden wolf in her outstretched palm. The crash was 11 months ago. His voice was hollow. Empty. I identified what was left of him. Did you see his face? Silence. They said he was burned. The fire after the crash. Visual identification wasn't possible. His jaw tightened. I identified him by his clothes. His backpack. Dental records. His wolf pendant? More silence. Sir, did they ever show you his wolf pendant? Declan's breathing changed. Faster. Shallower. They said it was thrown from the crash. Never recovered. Juniper pressed the pendant into his massive hand. He still has it. He sleeps with it every night. He told me it keeps the nightmares away because it means his daddy is still protecting him. The sound that came out of Declan Mercer wasn't quite a sob. Wasn't quite a scream. It was the sound of a man learning his son might be alive. 2 words. That's all Declan said. Get on. Not a request. Not an invitation. An order from a man who had just been handed a reason to live again. He was already moving toward the cemetery parking lot where a massive black Harley sat waiting. His whole body had changed. Where seconds ago he'd been hunched, broken, drowning in grief, now he moved like a machine locked onto a single target. Juniper had never been on a motorcycle in her life. She climbed on anyway. Declan shoved his helmet onto her head, his only helmet, leaving his own skull bare to the freezing wind. Before she could argue, his phone was already at his ear. Ironside. His voice was different now. Controlled. Dangerous. Emergency church. Everyone. The brewery on West 73rd Street. I need every patched member, every prospect, every hang-around who can throw a punch or swing a wrench. Juniper could hear a gravelly voice on the other end. Questioning. Confused. Victor. Declan's voice cracked on the name. Just for a second. My son might be alive. I'm looking at his wolf pendant right now. The one that was supposed to be destroyed in that fire. A homeless kid found him hiding in a basement. I know how it sounds. I know. But I need my brothers. Please. The pause. Shorter this time. Thank you. He ended the call, kicked the Harley to life, and the cemetery gates vanished behind them in a blur of speed and exhaust. The wind cut through Juniper like frozen knives. Her inadequate coat did nothing. Her wet socks had gone numb 10 minutes ago. But none of that mattered, because all she could think about was Dominic. His little face when she'd brought him soup 2 days ago. The way his hands shook so badly he'd spilled half of it down his chin. The way he'd looked at the floor and whispered, "I'm sorry for wasting food." 7 years old. Apologizing for being hungry. The way he'd grabbed her sleeve when she tried to leave. The desperation in his grip. The fear in his voice. Will you come back? Everyone always leaves. She'd promised him she would. She hadn't promised she'd bring his father. That was too big. Too impossible. Too much like hope, and hope was a weapon that had been used against both of them too many times. But now, clinging to the back of a Harley doing 60 through Cleveland's frozen streets, Juniper allowed herself to believe. Maybe some promises aren't impossible. Maybe some fathers never stop searching. Maybe some little boys get to go home. The abandoned Brennan Brewery rose ahead of them like a skeleton against the gray winter sky. And somewhere inside, a 7-year-old boy was waiting. The Brennan Brewery had been dead for 30 years. 3 stories of crumbling brick. Shattered windows gaping like missing teeth. Graffiti covering every surface the weather hadn't already destroyed. A monument to an economy that had packed up and left without saying goodbye. Juniper led Declan through a gap in the chain-link fence, down a rusted ladder, into a basement that smelled of mold, decay, and forgotten lives. Their breath came out in white clouds. Somewhere above them, pigeons cooed in the rafters like they owned the place. Maybe they did now. This way. Juniper's voice echoed off tile walls. He moves his hiding spot every few days. Doesn't trust anywhere for too long. But I found him yesterday near the boiler room. They walked in silence. Past rusted machines that hadn't run in decades. Past empty bottles and burned-out fires. Past abandoned blankets from others who'd sought shelter here and either moved on or didn't make it. The boiler room was at the end of a long hallway. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. Inside, massive old boilers stood like sleeping giants. And in the far corner, behind the largest one, there was a gap. Maybe 4 feet wide. Invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Juniper stopped. He doesn't trust adults, she whispered. Especially men. What they did to him, he's going to need proof you're real. Declan nodded. His massive hands, scarred knuckles, faded tattoos between the fingers, were trembling like leaves in a storm. Dominic? Juniper called softly. Dom, it's June. I brought someone. Someone who's been looking for you. Silence. Then, barely audible, did you bring more soup? The voice was small. Broken. The voice of a child who'd learned that whispers were safer than words. Declan made a sound like someone had driven a knife between his ribs. Buddy. The word came out choked. Buddy, it's Daddy. It's Daddy, little wolf. Can you hear me? Nothing. Then, you're not real. Certain. The kind of certainty that only comes from being lied to so many times that hope becomes just another way to get hurt. They showed me pictures, the small voice continued. They said you had a funeral. They said you put flowers on my grave. They said you don't want me anymore because I caused Mommy to die. Mommy didn't die, buddy. Tears were streaming down Declan's face now, vanishing into his beard. Mommy's home. Mommy's waiting for you. Mommy cries every single day because she misses you so much. We never stopped looking for you. Not for one single day. Movement in the shadows. A small face appeared in the gap. Dirty. Gaunt. Cheekbones too sharp for a child. Eyes too old for a face that young. But those eyes, green and bright even in the darkness, stared at Declan with a hope so fragile it could shatter at a breath. Prove it. Dom's voice cracked. Say the thing. The thing you always said when you tucked me in. Declan dropped to his knees. Right there in the filth and the cold, this giant of a man fell to his knees like he was praying. Little wolf, brave and true. Daddy's right here, protecting you. The small voice finished it. And broke. Then Dominic was running. Out of the shadows, across the concrete floor, slamming into his father's chest so hard they both nearly fell over. Declan's arms wrapped around him. The leather cut came off and went around the boy. And for a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of a father and son crying together in an abandoned building that had finally witnessed something worth seeing. Juniper stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her own face. But she also saw what Declan couldn't. The cigarette burns on Dom's forearms. The crooked fingers that had healed wrong. The flinch when the hug tightened. The scars, old and new, that told a story of 11 months in hell. This reunion was a miracle. But the nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. Comment right now with one word. Who was your protector when you needed one most? And keep watching, because what happens next proves that sometimes, the people society fears most become your only hope. The sound started as a distant rumble, like thunder rolling in from far away. Then it grew, and grew, and kept growing until the ground itself seemed to vibrate. By the time Juniper and Declan emerged from the brewery, Dominic, wrapped in his father's leather cut, clinging to his chest like he'd never let go, the parking lot had transformed. Motorcycles everywhere. Big men in leather. Women too. All wearing the same patches. Iron Wolves MC, Cleveland chapter, Toledo chapter, Youngstown chapter. 73 in the first hour. Another 40 in the second. By nightfall, the count would hit 168. The first to approach was a man in his 60s. Gray beard flowing down to his chest. Kind eyes that had seen too much but somehow stayed gentle. His patches read, President, and Ironside. Behind him walked a woman about the same age. Gray-streaked hair pulled back tight. A leather vest with Doc Eva stitched on the front. Medical bag in her hands. Victor, Ironside, Brennan stopped 10 feet from Declan. His eyes moved from Declan's face to the small bundle in his arms. The little boy peering out from the leather cut with terrified green eyes. Jesus Christ, Victor breathed. It's him, Vic. Declan's voice was raw. Shredded. It's my boy. Dom's alive. He's been alive this whole time. Victor crossed the distance slowly. Knelt down to the boy's eye level. When he spoke, his voice was softer than anyone who knew him would expect. Hey there, Dominic. I'm your Uncle Vic. You probably don't remember me, but I was at your 4th birthday party. You made me wear a princess crown because you said kings need crowns. A tiny flicker crossed Dom's face. Almost a smile. It was pink. It was pink, Victor confirmed. And I looked absolutely fabulous in it. The smile grew a fraction wider, then vanished as Dom's grip on his father tightened. The bad people are coming, he whispered. They always find the kids who run. They found Marcus. They found the others. They'll find me too. Declan's jaw clenched. Who, buddy? Who are the bad people? Dom buried his face against his father's chest. The doctors. The social workers. The policeman with the shiny star. His voice dropped even lower. They work together. They take kids who die in accidents. But we don't really die. We just disappear. The silence that followed was absolute. Every biker within earshot had stopped moving. Stopped breathing. Victor's expression shifted. The kindness was still there. But something else had joined it. Something cold. Something dangerous. How many kids, Dominic? Dom held up all 10 fingers. Then again. Then again. Then again. He ran out of fingers before he ran out of count. Victor stood slowly. Turned to Doc Eva. Examine the boy. Document everything. Photographs. Testimony. Every mark on his body. Then he faced the assembled brotherhood. His voice carried across the lot like a war drum. Brothers and sisters. We just discovered that a child trafficking ring has been operating in our city. Using emergency services. Using people we're supposed to trust. The rumble that went through the crowd was primal. Dangerous. We find every person responsible. We build a case so tight no lawyer can crack it. Then we hand it to the FBI and watch these monsters rot forever. He paused. We do this by the book. Justice, not revenge. Are we clear? Clear. The word echoed off the abandoned brewery walls like a battle cry. Juniper stood at the edge of the crowd. Invisible as always. Until a hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find Doc Eva behind her. You're the one who found him, Eva said quietly. Who kept him alive. Who brought Declan to him. Juniper nodded. Then you're one of us now, child. We have work to do. Within 72 hours, the Iron Wolves had transformed an abandoned warehouse into something that would make federal agencies jealous. Laptops lined folding tables. Evidence boards covered entire walls. Extension cords snaked across concrete floors like veins feeding a living machine. Juniper watched it all unfold with her mouth hanging open. These weren't just bikers. Sully Sullivan had been Army intelligence before he found the club. Now his fingers flew across keyboards, accessing public records, cross-referencing databases, building timelines that stretched across years. The bus crash, Sully announced, his voice tight with controlled rage. 7 children declared dead. But here's what's interesting. 3 of those kids had closed casket funerals. No viewings. All 3 examined by the same medical examiner. He pulled up a photo. Dr. Helena Vance. 23 years with Cuyahoga County. Excellent reputation. Multiple awards. Victor leaned in. What else? Still digging. But there's a pattern here. In another corner of the warehouse, a man called Priest was interviewing Dominic. Real name unknown. Former military chaplain. Something had broken his faith years ago, but the gentleness remained. Doc Evis sat beside Dom, holding his hand. There were other kids in the basement, Dominic said softly. 6 or 7. We weren't allowed to talk to each other. The doctors came every week. They took blood. Did tests. What happened to the other kids? Sometimes one would get picked. They said they were going to their new family. Dom's voice dropped. But they never came back. Nobody who got picked ever came back. Priest kept his face calm, but his knuckles had gone white. Who ran the basement, Dom? Who was in charge? A lady. Mrs. Kerrigan. She was nice when the doctors were there. Dom's hand moved unconsciously to the cigarette burns on his arm. But when they left, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Sully looked up from his laptop. Nadine Kerrigan. Licensed foster care provider. 14 children placed in her care over 8 years. Every single one transferred to permanent adoptive families out of state. No follow-up records. No forwarding addresses. 14 kids, someone muttered. Gone. At minimum, Sully confirmed. And here's the connection. The social worker who processed all 14 placements? Same guy. Richard Pemberton. 22 years with County Child Services. Spotless record. Community Service Awards. Real pillar of society type. He pulled up another file. But wait, there's more. Deputy Craig Hollister. County Sheriff's Department. He's the responding officer on 6 of the 7 fatal accidents that fed children into this system. 6 out of 7. In a county this size? That's not coincidence. Someone's assigning him specifically. The room had gone quiet. The conspiracy was taking shape on those evidence boards. A web of connections. Medical examiners. Social workers. Law enforcement. Foster care providers. All working together. All feeding children into a machine that made them disappear. But one question remained. Who was at the top? Sully kept typing. The answer was coming. And when it arrived 4 days later, it would shake Cleveland to its core. Because the monster running this entire operation wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was sitting in plain sight, wearing a black robe, making decisions about children's lives every single day. The break came on day 4. Sully had been staring at financial records for 16 hours straight. Eyes bloodshot. Coffee cups stacked around him like a fortress. His fingers had been flying across that keyboard so long they'd started to cramp. Then they stopped. You need to see this. Something in his voice made everyone freeze. Not excitement. Not triumph. Something closer to horror. The room gathered around his laptop. On the screen, wire transfers. Large sums. Routed through shell companies with names that meant nothing. Bouncing through accounts in 3 different states before landing in their final destinations. Pemberton. Vance. Hollister. Kerrigan. Sully pointed at each name. They're all receiving monthly payments from the same source. $15,000 each. Regular as clockwork. Every single month for years. Who's paying them? Victor's voice was ice. Sully pulled up a corporate registration document. The Westbrook Foundation. Established 1998. Stated purpose. He read directly from the screen. Supporting underprivileged children and families in crisis. Someone laughed bitterly. A charity. They hid it behind a charity. On paper, yes. But look at the foundation's board of directors. Sully clicked to another document. 3 names. The first 2 are dead. 1 heart attack in 2019. 1 car accident in 2021. Convenient timing on both. But the 3rd name. He scrolled down. The room went silent. Judge Theodore Cranston. Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the explosion. A judge. The juvenile court judge? The one who handles foster placements. The one who denied Catherine's request to view Dom's body? Called it psychologically harmful? Declan stood slowly from his corner. Dominic had finally fallen asleep in Catherine's arms in the next room. Declan's wife had arrived 12 hours after the discovery, and the reunion between mother and son had broken everyone who witnessed it. But now Declan's face was stone. That's why. His voice was barely audible. That's why they never let us see him. That's why they pushed for immediate cremation. That's why every single request we made got denied or redirected or lost in paperwork. He looked at Victor. The judge was running it from the top. He controlled who went into foster care, who got placed where, which children got declared dead and which ones just vanished. The evidence board suddenly made terrible sense. Accidents happened. A deputy controlled the scene. A medical examiner declared children dead. A social worker processed paperwork. A foster provider held them temporarily. And a judge made sure nobody asked questions. A perfect machine. Running for over a decade. Swallowing children whole. Victor turned to Priest. You still have contacts at the FBI? 1. Agent Rosalie Thornton. Cleveland Field Office. She's clean. I'd stake everything on it. Make the call. Tonight. Everything we have, testimony, financial records, pattern analysis, we hand it over. And we pray she moves fast. His jaw tightened. Because if Cranston gets wind that his network is exposed, witnesses start disappearing. And right now, the only witness who escaped alive is a 7-year-old boy sleeping in the next room. The weight of those words settled over everyone like a funeral shroud. They had the monster's name. Now they had to take him down before he destroyed the evidence. Starting with Dominic. If you believe people in power should be held accountable, hit that subscribe button right now. And comment, "Justice is coming," if you're not siding with the monsters. Because what happens next? Every single one of them is about to face what they feared most. Agent Rosalie Thornton arrived at 2 a.m. 12 federal agents behind her. Black SUVs. No sirens. No announcements. By 4 a.m., she'd reviewed everything the Iron Wolves had compiled. By 6 a.m., arrest warrants were being prepared. By 8 a.m., the raids began. Richard Pemberton was first. They found him at his home in the suburbs. Nice house. Manicured lawn. American flag by the front door. He was still in his bathrobe eating scrambled eggs when federal agents came through his kitchen door. The look on his face, confusion melting into terror, would stay with the arresting officers for years. 22 years of service. Community awards on his wall. And handcuffs on his wrists. Dr. Helena Vance was next. They took her at Cleveland Clinic, right before her morning shift. White coat. Stethoscope around her neck. Coffee in her hand. The coffee hit the floor when she saw the badges. Her colleagues watched in frozen silence as federal agents escorted one of their most respected physicians out in handcuffs. 23 years of trust, shattered in 30 seconds. Deputy Craig Hollister saw them coming. Tried to run. Made it onto I-90 before an unmarked federal vehicle pulled him over for a broken taillight. He never reached his destination. Nadine Kerrigan fought. Screaming about lawyers. About rights. About how they had no idea who they were dealing with. She made it 3 blocks before a federal SUV cut her off. The screaming stopped when they showed her the photographs of the children. The burn marks. The medical records. The financial transfers with her name attached. She went quiet after that. Judge Theodore Cranston was the last to fall. They found him in his chambers. Black robe pressed and ready. Calendar full of juvenile hearings. Children's futures he'd been deciding for over 2 decades. When the FBI walked through his door, he didn't run. Didn't scream. Didn't fight. He just smiled. I want my lawyer. That smile vanished 3 hours later, because what they found at his lake house made national headlines. Records. Detailed records. Names. Dates. Prices. 47 children. Trafficked through his network over 12 years. Sold to buyers across the country. Some overseas. 14 had already been recovered. Alive. Damaged in ways that would take years to heal. But alive. The search for the others continued. But justice wasn't quite finished. Because while the FBI was raiding Cranston's lake house, someone else had been dispatched. Someone tasked with tying up loose ends. Someone sent to silence the only witness who'd escaped. A 7-year-old boy sleeping in a safe house surrounded by bikers. The would-be abductor made it within 50 feet of the door. Then found himself surrounded by 23 iron wolves who had been waiting all night for exactly this moment. He's currently cooperating fully with federal investigators. Very fully. 3 months later, Juniper stood in a living room she barely recognized. The last time she'd seen photographs of the Mercer home, it had been a tomb. Curtains drawn. Lights dim. A shrine to a dead child frozen in time. Now sunlight poured through open windows. Laughter echoed from the backyard. The smell of fresh cookies drifted from the kitchen. And through the sliding glass door, Juniper could see Dominic. Running. Playing. Chasing a German Shepherd puppy named Duke that the club had given him 2 months ago. The boy and the dog were inseparable now. Where one went, the other followed. Dom's fingers had been surgically corrected. His burns were fading to pale scars. The nightmares still came, but less often now. And when they did, there were arms to hold him. Voices to remind him he was safe. A family that would never let him go again. June. Catherine Mercer appeared in the doorway. You ready? Juniper looked down at herself. New dress. First one she'd owned in 4 years. Bought specifically for today. Ready. They drove to the Iron Wolves clubhouse together. Inside, every member of every chapter had assembled. 168 bikers packed into a space that probably shouldn't hold half that many. Leather everywhere. Gray beards and young faces. Men and women who looked like they'd walked through fire and come out harder. But today, they weren't hard. Today, they were family. And standing near the back, holding on to a woman who looked like she'd aged 20 years in 4, was Juniper's mother. Rachel Holloway had been found 3 weeks after Dominic's rescue. Living in a tent city on Cleveland's west side. Suffering from pneumonia. Convinced her daughter was dead. The Mercers had paid for her treatment. The club had found her an apartment. A job at a local diner, arranged by a member's wife who managed the place. For the first time in 4 years, Juniper had a home with heat. Food in the refrigerator. A mother who was getting stronger every day. Victor called the room to order. Today, we honor one of our own. His voice carried easily over the crowd. Juniper Holloway came to us with nothing. No home. No family. No reason to trust anyone. She could have walked past that basement. Could have kept her head down. Could have survived the way she'd learned to survive, by staying invisible. He paused. Instead, she saw a child in need. Fed him. Protected him. And then did the bravest thing anyone in this room has ever witnessed. She walked up to a grieving father and spoke a truth nobody believed. Victor turned to face her directly. The club has voted. Unanimous. Every chapter. The room went silent. From this day forward, you carry a road name. You are Phoenix. Because you rose from ashes. Because you brought a dead boy back to life. Because everyone who underestimated you did so at their own risk. 168 voices. One word. Phoenix. It echoed off the walls. Shook the floor. Rattled the windows. Juniper felt tears streaming down her face. Felt her mother's hands squeezing hers. Felt, for the first time in 17 years, like she belonged somewhere. Then small arms wrapped around her waist. Dominic had broken away from his parents and sprinted across the room. You're my sister now, he said matter-of-factly. That's what Phoenix means. Your pack. Juniper laughed through her tears. Yeah, little wolf. I'm Pack. If this story is hitting you in the heart, Share it with someone who needs to hear that speaking up matters. Comment Phoenix if you believe the forgotten deserve a second chance. 6 months after the arrests, Juniper graduated from high school. She was 17. Too old for her grade, 3 years on the streets had stolen that time. But she'd caught up, tested into her senior year, graduated with honors. And somehow, she'd been chosen as the student commencement speaker. The auditorium was packed. In one section, 53 Iron Wolves sat in their Sunday best, which still included a lot of leather. Declan had Dominic on his shoulders, holding a handmade sign that read, "Go Phoenix," in crooked letters. Rachel Holloway was crying. Catherine Mercer was crying. Victor Brennan was definitely not crying. It was allergies. Ask anyone. Juniper walked across that stage, accepted her diploma, then turned to face the audience, the cameras, the crowd of strangers who'd come to hear a homeless girl speak about her life. She took a breath. I was invisible for most of my life. Her voice carried across the silent auditorium. Homeless, hungry, forgotten. The world doesn't see people like me. We're background noise. Problems to ignore. We're not main characters in any one story. She paused. But 11 months ago, I found a little boy hiding in a basement. 7 years old. Declared dead. Waiting to be sold like property. And I had a choice. Stay invisible. Stay safe. Or speak. Her voice grew stronger. I chose to speak. Not because I'm brave, I was terrified. Not because I'm special, I'm just a kid from the streets. But because that little boy needed someone. And I was there. And being there meant I couldn't walk away. She looked directly at Dominic. Sometimes the most powerless person in the room holds the key to saving someone's entire world. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the only one brave enough to tell the truth. Her eyes swept the audience. If you see someone who needs help, say something. If a child is missing, don't stop looking. Because somewhere out there, there's a little boy hiding in a basement, whispering his father's name, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The applause shook the building, but Juniper barely heard it. She was looking at Dominic, who was looking back at her with those big green eyes, who held up his wooden wolf pendant and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. And Juniper, Phoenix, smiled. Because some stories don't have endings. They have beginnings. Sometimes the people society fears most become your only hope. Sometimes miracles don't come from heaven. They come from a homeless girl with a wooden pendant and the courage to speak 6 impossible words. Your son is still alive, sir. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that speaking up matters. Drop a comment. Would you have had the courage to approach that biker? And remember, this world needs more phoenixes. Maybe that person could be you. If you see something, say something. Someone's child is waiting to be found. Can bikers